Welcome everybody to the joint council candidate information session. Just a few housekeeping items. So restrooms are just located right outside the door. I believe it's men's on the right, women's on the left. And we're planning to have a break midway through the session, and we'll have light refreshments available. So we do expect the session to take less than 2 hours. And a recording of the session is going to be uploaded online afterwards. We'll also share the slide deck. The ministry's been good enough to offer that. And after the session, each municipal clerk will have copies of their own election nomination packages, and we'll be sticking around if anybody's got specific questions that you'd like to ask after the session here. For reference, I'll just introduce you to some of the municipal clerks. We've got Allison Adams from the Township of Malahide, and we've got Thomas Thayer, Clerk CAO, Municipality of Bayonne. And I'm Josh Brick, Clerk at the Town of Elmer. I should also note that the municipal advisors have requested that any questions that you have are held until the end of the session. We'll have a question period at that point. We're going to try and keep the presentation moving this evening. And so today we welcome Carol Sobe and Caitlin Reddick, who are municipal advisors with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And so we've got Caitlin here and we've got Carol there. And I should also mention that currently Elgin County's municipal advisor is James Parnell, and we've got her contact information up on the screen there. And with that said, I'll hand the presentation over to Carol and Caitlin.
So thank you to the Town of Elmer, the Township of Malahide, and the Municipality of Bayonne for inviting us and for hosting the candidate and third-party advertiser information session. So we're just going to start with a disclaimer. These slides, they're meant to be a summary of some of the sections, and they should not be relied on for legal or official purposes. I do want to stress that we're not lawyers, and that you should always consult the legislation and seek legal advice when necessary. Okay? We will not be able to cover every aspect of the municipal election, but we do hope that this provides you with a better understanding of the process and legislation, and that it improves your comfort level. So congratulations for taking an interest in your community and in local government, whether you're interested in serving on a municipal council or on a school board or registering as a third-party advertiser. Just get the hang of this. All right. So this slide outlines some of the topics we want to cover during this session. So we're going to look at the roles of elected members of council, head of council, and municipal staff, as well as the role of the school board trustee. The nomination process and how a candidate withdraws a nomination, and what happens if a candidate files a nomination and then changes his or her mind about which office they want to run for. We're going to look at key dates. Who is eligible to run for municipal office and school boards and who isn't? General campaign rules and election finances. So that's the campaign spending limits, contribution limits, campaign expenses, borrowing, what expenses are exempt from the spending limit, finance surplus deficit, financial reporting at the end of the campaign period. These are all important things we need to know. We're also going to look at compliance audits initiated by an application, penalties, general information about the voters list, rights of scrutineers at the poll, recounts, and then we're going to end with showing you where you can find the resources, all the Municipal Act and the guides. We've done this presentation virtually quite a bit, so this is our first time doing it in person. We got to figure our way out. Okay, so considering running for municipal office. Local government is the level of government that is closest to the people and is the most accessible and responsive to the needs of the community. So you've made a decision to throw your hat in the ring, or you're thinking about it and you're just curious to know how to go about it. Perhaps it's something you've always wanted to do. You want to make a difference. You're not happy with some of the decisions that have been made, or you just have a real good passion for politics. So regardless, it's a 4-year commitment that will be filled with challenges, excitement, disappointment, hard work, and a great deal of satisfaction. So Ontario municipal governments deliver local services, while the province establishes the legislative and policy framework. The Ontario government sets the standards for many local services, such as land use planning, building regulations, and social housing, and the province provides funding to municipalities for delivery of some of the services. So the ministry also works in partnership with the municipal sector to support efficient and responsive local governments that are sustainable and investment ready. Local government is a challenging environment with high expectations and limited resources. You will be doing more with less. Government is not like any other business. You can't make everybody happy. So council must make difficult decisions in the best interest of the municipality. So before we get into an overview of the Municipal Elections Act, we wanted to provide a brief summary of the role of the elected municipal officials and the role of staff. So please note that the information about the role of council and staff and accountability and transparency, this all can be found in the Councilor's Guide. That's on the ministry's website. We will show you where to find it. This guide is an excellent tool that can provide you with a lot more information about how municipalities operate and how council and staff can work together in the best interest of the municipality. So, I'm just going to start by saying that the Municipal Act stipulates that municipalities are created by the province to be responsible and accountable governments with respect to matters within their jurisdiction. And each municipality is given powers and duties under the Municipal Act and other pieces of legislation for the purpose of providing good government. So the Municipal Act is a legislative framework for municipalities which seeks to balance local autonomy and flexibility with accountability and transparency of municipal operations. So the key to any organization, government, business, industry, or local service, is for everyone to understand their respective roles and relationships. So in the next few slides, we're going to review the role of the mayor's role as the chief executive officer, the role of council, and the role of municipal staff. They're all key to be an effective and efficient local government. All right, so section 224 of the Municipal Act. So it's the role of council to represent the public and to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality. Council develops and evaluates the policies and programs of that municipality. They determine which services the municipality will provide. They ensure that administrative and controllership policies, practices, and procedures are in place to implement the decisions of council. They also ensure the accountability and transparency of the operations of the municipality, including the activities of the senior management of the municipality. So they maintain the financial integrity of the municipality, and they carry out the duties of council under the Municipal Act or any other act. So other acts, just to go real quick, the Planning Act, Municipal Elections Act, Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, those are some of the acts that you'll be dealing with. So it's also the role of council to conduct meetings, to pass bylaws, to develop policies with respect to accountability and transparency, notice to public, delegation of authority, hiring, disposition and sale of land, procurement of goods and services, relationship between council and staff, protection of tree canopy, natural vegetation, pregnancy and parental leave. Those are just some of the key examples, but there's obviously many more. It's also done as a collective group with all members each having one vote. So municipalities are created to be, now I'm going to skip that one. Let's do it. All right, next one. Okay. No, I think I went ahead a little bit too fast. Okay. So the role of head of council is to act as the chief executive officer to preside over council meetings so that business can be carried out efficiently and effectively, to provide leadership to the council and to provide information and recommendations to the council on policies, practices, procedures to ensure transparency and accountability. I'm going to hand over to my colleagues so to have a drink with all this stuff. Just practicing.
Thank you. Okay. So head of council continues. So although the legislation refers to the head of council as the chief executive officer of the municipality, this might be a bit confusing to people with a business background. The head of council actually has very few powers that can be exercised independently of the rest of council, except where specifically delegated in cases of emergency or in the context of procedural matters during a council meeting. The head of council has no greater power than any other individual member of council. It is important to know that council makes decisions, not an individual council member, including the head of council. To clarify, the head of council always has a vote. There is sometimes confusion on this point in the media and with people who think that the head of council can only vote in the case of a tie. Another clarification regarding voting is refraining from voting counts as a no vote. This is spelled out specifically in legislation in the case of recorded votes. A tie loses, so the result is the same as having no vote. Staff role. The role of staff is set out in Section 227 of the Municipal Act. This would include implementing council's decisions and establish administrative practices and procedures to carry out council's decisions, undertake research and provide advice to council on policies and programs of the municipality, carry out duties required by legislation or other duties assigned by the municipality. A key feature of an effective and efficient council is a well-developed understanding of the council's staff relations and the role of each party. The Councilor's Guide provides a list of ways that council members can assist staff to meet council's expectations. Here are a few examples. Having a policy requiring comprehensive job descriptions for all staff, providing clear policy decisions, directions, and expectations, adopting policies that complement and reinforce staff efforts, consulting with staff before deciding on policies, and lastly, being prepared for council meetings. Staff in turn should provide well-organized agendas with supporting materials, provide sufficient, timely information and analysis to make council's decision-making process easier, notify council of changes to legislation and programs, provide advice on policy, including options and recommended actions, identifying costs and benefits for the community in human and financial terms, notify council immediately of any unexpected or unintended impacts of policy decisions, and lastly, implement council decisions as effectively and professionally as possible. As you know, there are some municipal staff positions that have statutory obligations, such as the clerk, treasurer, chief building official, and fire chief. It is important that council not interfere with the statutory obligations of these roles. For example, the clerk and treasurer positions have statutory duties and responsibilities assigned to them under the Municipal Act, or other pieces of legislation. The building code would define statutory duties for the chief building official, and the Fire Prevention and Protection Act would define statutory duties for the fire chief. The role of Chief Administrative Officer, CAO. The Municipal Act sets out the role of the CAO in Section 229. A municipality may appoint a CAO who shall be responsible for exercising general control and management of the affairs of the municipality for the purpose of ensuring the efficient and effective operation of the municipality and performing such other duties as are assigned by the municipality. The function of the CAO within the municipality is generally akin to the role of the Chief Executive Officer in a business environment. The CAO is responsible for the general control and management of the day-to-day operations in the municipality, which may include developing and implementing appropriate internal administrative practices and procedures to ensure the efficient, effective, and accountable operation of the municipality. To help understand the role of the CAO in the municipality, picture an hourglass. Council's at one end, and all municipal staff and department heads are at the other. The CAO is in the middle, the smallest part where the sand in the hourglass flows through. So if council wants to give direction to a specific department, the communication would flow through the CAO. Likewise, if a department wants to give information, reports, etc. to council, it would flow through the CAO. Council staff relationships. The Councilor's Guide provides some very useful information on how council and staff can work together. This slide provides you with a high-level overview of the relationship. Councils and their administration have different roles within a municipality, but their roles have common goals and purposes. In general, it is the role of the elected council to represent the community and set the direction and policy for the municipality. And it is the role of staff to manage people and resources to achieve council's vision. Council generally sets the policy direction for the municipality, and staff provides the research and expert advice to help council in its decision-making process. Once council makes a decision, staff generally have the responsibility to implement the policy of council. For example, through administrating and delivering services and programs to your community. Staff and council rely on one another to move the municipality forward. Both staff and council provide leadership. Council provides political leadership, while administration provides leadership to the organization. The relationship between staff and council is interconnected. And it is important for council members and staff to respect one another's roles so that they can serve the public in an effective and efficient manner. Municipalities are required to adopt a policy on the relationship between members of council and municipal staff. Municipalities have the flexibility to determine the content of these policies. They're usually called like staff and council policies. So like take a look at your municipalities one to get a better idea. The representative role. The next few slides will provide a bit more information on each of the roles of council as described in the Councilor's Guide. So again, the Councilor's Guide is available on the ministry's website. I find it's a really helpful tool. It's basically an overview of the presentation. In your role as a representative, you were elected by your constituents to represent their views when dealing with issues that come before council. However, your constituents have many views and opinions, and you cannot represent all of them all of the time. For many issues, you will have to consider a variety of opposing interests and make decisions that will not be popular with everyone. You should use your judgment and decide based on the best interests of the municipality as a whole. In practice, there's no single correct approach to the representative role, and on many issues, you may find that you fall somewhere between the two opposing viewpoints. Be sure to familiarize yourself with any policies or protocols that your municipality may have in place regarding the handling of complaints. and citizens' inquiries. Although you may want to find some way of helping, remember to consult with your municipal staff. If your municipality doesn't already have a complaint policy, council may consider adopting one. Furthermore, there may be circumstances where decisions are made by designated staff that operate at arm's length of the municipality, and where it could be inappropriate for elected officials to interfere or be seen as interfering. Examples of this would include decisions made by the fire chief, chief building official, or the medical officer of health. A councillor who has made promises that cannot be kept may lose credibility with the citizens and strain a working relationship with staff. As I mentioned before, each individual council member has one vote when making decisions. Every member of council should vote on matters in the best interest of the municipality as a whole. And every member should respect each other's points of view during and after debating an issue at the council table. Once a decision is made by council, it is the decision of the municipality and staff required to carry out and implement that decision. Policy-making role. Some council decisions are routine. Others establish general principles to help guide future actions. Those are often considered policy decisions. Some policies can be specific, such as a bylaw requiring dogs to be kept on leashes in public areas, and others can be broader and more general, such as an approval of an official plan. How is policy made? Well, that's a great question, everyone. This slide outlines the general process undertaken during the policy-making role. The Councilor's Guide does provide a lot of detail on the policy-making process, but I'll provide a high-level overview. You start by identifying the issue. As council, you agree on what the issue is and what the objectives are. Council would then direct staff to research the issue further and identify and recommend options to council. There may be the need to consult with the public and consider this feedback, and council would then review staff information and consider factors such as demands on time to implement the policy, any cost implications, and etc. Council makes a decision on the best course of action and adopts the policy. From there, staff is directed to implement that policy. After the policy is implemented, council would work with staff to evaluate the policy and make any amendments that may be required. In practice, the policy making is sometimes less orderly than what appears on the slide because of various factors, such as there could be differing and sometimes strongly held views by stakeholders and members of the public. There could be a lack of time to identify all possible alternatives and to conduct detailed research and analysis. There could be legal and financial implications limiting what council may do. And lastly, the implementation of the policy, along with the establishment of monitoring and evaluating mechanisms, may be complex. To recap, council is the primary policy-making body of the municipality, while administrative staff is responsible for carrying out council policy decisions. The two roles are distinct, but there can be much overlap. Although staff is responsible for implementing a policy, council may wish to develop appropriate reporting mechanisms to help ensure that the policies are being carried out as intended and as effectively as possible so that council can follow implementation progress. Stewardship role. Council's objectives are to ensure that the municipality's financial and administrative resources are being used as efficiently as possible. There is a fine line between council's overall stewardship of the municipality and the administration's management of day-to-day activities. Generally, council monitors the implementation of its approved policies and programs, but the practical aspect of its implementation and administration are staff responsibility. Essentially, the day-to-day operations of the municipality are left up to staff. To be effective in the stewardship role, council may wish to have processes in place to help ensure that. I'll just name a few. Staff are administrating services and programs as council intended. Policies adopted by council are being implemented. Rules and regulations are being applied correctly and consistently. And lastly, funds are being spent only as authorized, and the municipality's resources, such as financial and otherwise, are being used appropriately and as efficiently as possible. Establishing and following such policies and guidelines helps council lead the day-to-day details for staff to manage. Council is freer to deal with the exceptional situations and ensure that policies are current and listen to issues raised by the public to represent the broader community interests. Before council can monitor and measure the municipality's administrative effectiveness and efficiency, it may wish to become familiar with policies currently in place. With input from municipal staff, council can determine whether policies are functioning well or if changes are necessary. Accountability and transparency. Ontario municipalities and members of council operate under a legislative accountability and transparency framework that include rules for the municipality and rules for members of council and local boards. Ensuring accountability and transparency is one of council's roles under Section 224 of the Municipal Act and is a priority in maintaining public trust. Councilors are, of course, accountable to the public as elected officials. However, it is also important that procedures and policies are clearly set out and accessible, and that the day-to-day operations of the municipality are transparent. This slide outlines policies that council are required to adopt. Codes of conduct. So codes of conduct usually set out expectations and standards for councillor conduct. Codes may help prevent ethical conflicts and help in their resolution, serve as a basis for council orientation and training, and serve as a reference throughout the operation of council's term. With the growing importance of accountability and integrity, more municipalities have adopted codes of conduct for members of council and certain local boards. Some have also adopted other procedures and rules and policies governing the ethical behavior of those municipalities. I would suggest highly looking at your municipality's codes of conduct to get a better understanding of them. Lastly, municipalities are required to establish codes of conduct for members of council and certain local boards, which may include certain subject matters. I'm going to just name a few. This might include gifts, benefits of hospitality, confidential information, and lastly, use of municipal or local board property and equipment. Now I'm going to hand it back over to Carol.
Just gonna get to there. Okay, so sorry about this. So accountability officers. So municipalities are required to provide access to an integrity commissioner. An integrity commissioner operates independent of council and reports to council with respect to the application of a code of conduct of members of council and local boards. So procedures, rules, policies governing the ethical behavior of members of council. The integrity commissioner, often that's a law firm that will be hired by the municipality. They function Their function also includes providing counsel advice and education about the code and other ethical rules to members of council and the public, as well as members. I'm used to not doing this virtually. Sorry about that. So they also conduct inquiries into requests from council or local board, a member of council or board, or a member of the public about whether a member of council or local board has contravened the application the applicable code of conduct. So if the integrity commissioner reports that in their opinion, a member of council has contravened the code of conduct, the municipality may impose a penalty in the form of a reprimand or a suspension of pay for a period of up to 90 days. It's up to the municipality to decide how to proceed after they receive an integrity commissioner's report. So to help ensure integrity and accountability, municipalities have the authority to appoint certain integrity and accountability type officers. So those include the municipal ombudsman. This officer's function is to investigate in an independent manner decisions and recommendations made and actions done or omitted in the course of the administration of a municipality, local boards, or a certain municipal corporation as the municipality specifies. This is a separate office from the Ontario Ombudsman. So you've got the municipal ombudsman, you've got the Ontario Ombudsman, who also has a role with respect to municipalities. They can appoint an auditor general who may assist council in holding itself and municipal administrators accountable for the quality of stewardship over public funds and achieving value for money in municipal operations. And if they wish, a municipality can appoint a lobbyist registry and registrar and a registration system. So that establishes a code of conduct for lobbyists, and it prohibits former public office holders from lobbying for a specified time period. So the Ontario Ombudsman may have a role with respect to municipalities. This role builds on the local accountability and transparency framework in the Municipal Act. So this role is in addition to the Ontario Ombudsman's role as the default meeting investigator for municipalities that have not appointed a local meeting investigator. So the Ontario Ombudsman supports transparency in government and may recommend improvements. The Ontario Ombudsman may investigate municipalities when a complaint is received or on the Ombudsman's own initiative. Although the Ontario Ombudsman may investigate, they cannot compel municipalities to take action. The Ombudsman may make recommendations to council and the municipality as part of their report, but it is up to the municipality whether or how to address any recommendations made by the Ombudsman. It is also up to the Ombudsman how to respond to complaints. So for example, the Ontario Ombudsman's practice is to investigate complaints made to local integrity officers only after the local complaint processes have been completed. So the Ontario Ombudsman does not replace locally established complaint mechanisms or act as an integrity commissioner for municipalities. Local integrity officers and municipal codes of conduct are an important part of Ontario's local accountability framework. So certain local boards, for example, the Police Services Board, Children's Aid Societies, they may be exempted from the Ontario Ombudsman's oversight. For more information, you can look up Ontario Regulation 11415 under the Ombudsman's Act. So personal privacy and other confidential issues are an important practical and legal consideration for municipal councillors and staff. The Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act is the primary statute for privacy and confidentiality. It sets out the rules for collection, use, and disclosure of personal information. According to these rules, counselors and staff in most circumstances protect personal privacy and only collect, use, and disclose personal information in accordance with those rules. So, for example, depending on circumstances, counselors and staff may or may not be authorized to obtain personal information in the course of their duties. So this might mean that at times counselors could not obtain this kind of information even from staff. So municipal freedom of information legislation also regulates confidential information of other kinds. So counselors who may have received personal or other confidential information in the course of their duties have related responsibilities such as protecting and safeguarding the information. Counselors may wish to check with municipal staff about appropriate measures and the municipality's practices. So the role of the school board trustee. So the Education Act creates 4 different kinds of school boards. You've got the English language public district school boards to govern the provision of elementary and secondary English language instruction in schools other than Roman Catholic separate schools. You've got the English language separate district school boards to govern the provision of elementary and secondary English language instructions in Roman Catholic separate schools. You've got the French language public district school boards, and they govern the provisions of elementary and secondary French language instructions in schools other than Roman Catholic separate schools. And you've got the French language separate district school board that governs the provision of elementary and secondary French language instruction in Roman Catholic separate schools. So just to clear up for those of you who want to become school trustees, they are members of the school board. They're locally elected representatives of the public, and they are the community's advocate for public education. Only the board, not an individual trustee, has the authority to make decisions or take action. A trustee is often the first point of contact for parents and community members who have questions or concerns about their local school. So candidates should contact the applicable school board for further information about duties and commitments and all those. So basically the role of a school board trustee is to establish policy direction and to participate in making decisions that benefit the entire school board while representing the interests of constituents. School board trustees are accountable to constituents, the Ministry of Education, and families. So, municipal office eligibility, ineligibility. So you must be an eligible voter, which means you must be able to vote. So the list above is a list that shows voter eligibility, as well as the eligibility to run and hold office. You can only be nominated if, as of the day you are nominated, you're qualified to hold that office under the Act, and you're not ineligible under the Municipal Elections Act or any other act, or otherwise prohibited by law to be nominated or to hold the office. So please note, Section 30 of the Municipal Elections Act states that a person shall not be considered an employee for this section by reason only of being a volunteer firefighter as defined in the Fire Protection and Prevention Act. So if a municipal employee wishes to run for office on that municipality's council, they must take a leave of absence before filing their nomination form. And if they're elected, he or she shall be deemed to have resigned from the employment immediately before making the declaration of office. So an employee of a municipality who wants to run for an office in a different municipality doesn't have to take a leave of absence or resign, but they must check with their employer to see if there's any policies that could affect them. So any questions you have about school board eligibility should be directed to the school board secretary. Now, this is important. If you are an employee of any school board and you wish to run for a trustee position on any school board in the province, you must take an unpaid leave of absence before you file your nomination form. If elected, you must resign from your job. You cannot work for a school board and be a trustee in Ontario at the same time. So the following people are disqualified from being elected as a school trustee. You cannot be a clerk, a deputy clerk, a treasurer, deputy treasurer of a municipality within the jurisdiction of the board. Any person not eligible to vote in the municipality. Any employee of a school board unless they take an unpaid leave of absence and resign if they're elected. And just like in ineligibility for a municipal office, a judge of any court, a member of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, a senator or a member of the House of Commons, or an inmate of a penal or correctional institution under sentence of imprisonment. So third-party advertisers, basically a third-party advertiser is an individual, corporation, or trade union that is registered in the municipality to promote, support, or oppose a candidate or a yes or no question on the ballot. Third-party advertisement means an advertisement in any broadcast, print, electronic, or other medium that has the purpose of promoting, supporting, or opposing either a candidate or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. So this is your list of eligible and ineligible candidates for third-party advertisers. I'm going to hand this to my colleague for the next step.
So the next few slides are really important, so please pay attention. It's on the nomination process. So the first day for filing nominations is coming up real quick, May 1st, 2022. Please note that this is a Sunday. So unless the clerk has policies in place to permit electronic filing, candidates may have to wait until Monday, May 2nd to file their nomination. The last day and time for filing nominations for the 2022 elections is on Friday, August 19th, 2022 by 2 p.m. The nomination filing fee is only refunded once the candidate submits a completed financial disclosure of all financial transactions made up to the date the nomination was withdrawn. Nomination day. The nomination day for a regular election is the fourth Friday in August in the year of the election. And in 2022, again, that is August 19th of this year. Withdrawal of a nomination. Local elections policies may state a candidate must personally attend the clerk's office to withdraw candidacy. If a candidate is in the hospital or incapacitated, this may not be feasible. If a candidate withdraws a nomination, they are still required to file a campaign financial statement covering all financial transactions made in the campaign. If they have not spent any money nor raised any funds, they can click on the box and sign the form, and it is complete. Again, the forms are on the ministry's website, so please check that out. If a nomination is withdrawn, the candidate is entitled to a refund of their nomination filing fee only after they file their financial auditor statements by the required deadline. An issue that is raised infrequently but is of importance nonetheless is what happens to a campaign which has been open and a candidate decides to run for a different office. Starting on May 1st until the close of business on August 19, 2022, Nominations can be submitted to the clerk from anyone who meets the eligibility criteria to run for the office. May 1st is a Sunday, so you may not be able to file your registration until May 2nd when the clerk's office is open. Candidates must complete a Form 1, the nomination paper, and submit it to the clerk along with the applicable nomination fee, filing fee. The filing fee is $200 for anyone running for the head of council and $100 for all other offices. The clerk must be satisfied that you are eligible to run in order to certify your nomination. The clerk can ask you to show identification or fill out an additional form to prove that you are eligible to run for that particular office. The nomination form must have an original signature, and if your nomination is not certified by the clerk, your name will not appear on the ballot. As long as you are eligible to vote in your municipality, you may run in any ward. If you do run in a ward where you do not live, you will not be able to vote for yourself, as you must vote in the ward in which you reside. In addition to the legislative requirements, each municipal clerk must establish their own processes and procedures related to submitting a nomination. So it is important to contact the clerk of your municipality so you understand the process. Nomination process, 25 signatures required. Municipal council candidates are required to obtain 25 signatures on Form 2. Please note that forms for the 2022 municipal elections are now available. So please check that, and if you need more assistance, you can reach out to your municipal advisor or your local clerk for more information. Ontario Regulation 101-97 provides an exemption to this requirement for candidates in municipalities with less than 4,000 electors. Please note that the requirement for nominators to sign nomination forms does not apply to school board candidates. For more information, please refer to Section 33, subsection 1.1 of the Municipal Elections Act for more information. Nominators can nominate more than one candidate and are not required to vote for that candidate. Nominators must meet the eligibility requirements of a municipal elector at the time they sign the nomination form. In a ward system, the nominator can be anyone who is eligible to vote in that municipality, not just the ward. Both the clerk and the candidate are entitled to rely upon the information provided by the nominator. If the nominator did not meet the eligibility requirements when they signed the document, then they could be held accountable. Under the penalties section of the Municipal Elections Act, we'll also be talking about penalties further on in the presentation. If the candidate wishes, they can provide more than 25 signatures. Candidates should remember, running for a different office. Occasionally, a candidate changes their mind and decides to run for a different office. You can only run for one office at a time. If a candidate files a second nomination, the first nomination is deemed to be withdrawn. If a candidate decides to run for another office and they have already collected the 25 endorsement signatures, they can use these endorsements for the other office. If a candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board, and both positions are elected at large, everything from the first campaign is transferred to the second campaign, and only one financial statement needs to be filed. Unless the candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board, and one or both offices are elected by the ward, the two campaigns must be kept separate, and two financial statements must be filed. Registration of third-party advertisers. So as Carol mentioned, third-party advertisers are individuals, corporations, trade unions that may register to be third-party advertisers. There's no registration fee for third-party advertisers, and a third-party advertiser would register with the clerk at their local municipality And for more information on this, please refer to section 88.6 subsection 1 of the Municipal Elections Act for more information on how to file with your clerk. I'm just going to touch on third-party advertiser withdrawal. So the third-party advertiser's registration is deemed to be withdrawn if they file a nomination. This means that their advertising campaign would automatically end when they file that nomination. If a corporation or trade union is registered as a third-party advertiser, it would not be affected by a person filing a nomination, as the person would not be the same entity. The existing campaign rules would not change, and finances related to a third-party advertising campaign could not be transferred to a candidate's campaign. The existing campaign finance rules would not change, and a third-party advertiser who withdraws and closes their campaign cannot transfer that campaign to someone else. The registration period for third-party advertisers runs until the Friday before voting day, October 21st, 2022, or the last day the clerk's office is open before voting day in a by-election. So these next few slides, again, are really important. They're about contributions. I would highly suggest listening to these parts. Thanks. So campaigns accounts are only required if the candidate or third-party advertiser raises or spends money. So for acclamations and campaigns where no funds are raised or spent, there's no need for a campaign account. Trade unions and corporations are not eligible to contribute to candidates' campaigns, although they can participate in the election as third-party advertisers or make contributions to third-party advertising campaigns. Third-party advertisers will generally need to follow the same rules for raising campaign funds and financial reporting as candidates for office. Municipalities must establish rules and procedures regarding the use of municipal or local board resources during the campaign period. This must be passed by May 1st in the year of the election. This will encourage accountability and transparency, so ensure that you are aware of the municipality's policy in this regard. The practice of municipalities of providing candidate contact information on their websites is not a contribution. So generally the same contribution rules will apply to a third-party advertiser campaign as to candidates. The following amounts are contributions. An amount charged for admission to a fundraising function. If goods and services are sold for more than their market value at a fundraising function, the difference between the amount paid and the market value. However, if the amount received for the goods or services is less than $25, the amount is not a contribution. If goods and services used in the person's election campaign or in relation to third-party advertisements are purchased for less than their market value, the difference between the market value and the amount paid. And lastly, an unpaid but guaranteed balance in respect of a loan under section 88.17 of the Municipal Elections Act. Again, the slide decks will be provided. I believe the municipalities are posting them on their website, so if you don't catch everything, you can check back and the decks will be available to everyone. Contributions continued. So contributions from the candidate and their spouse are considered to have come from the same person and count against the self-contribution limit. The rules for determining whether corporations are considered to be one contributor are clarified. If one corporation controls the other directly or indirectly, then they are considered to be the same contributor. If corporations are owned or controlled by the same person or groups of persons, either directly or indirectly, they are considered to be the same contributor. Contributions continued again. So we get asked, the next few bullets I'm going to mention, we get asked this question every single session. So just throw that out there. The value of services provided by volunteers is generally not considered to be a contribution. If a professional, such as a lawyer or an accountant, volunteers to provide services for which they would normally be paid, The market value of the service must be recorded as a contribution by the volunteer and is a campaign expense. As mentioned previously, only third-party advertisers can accept contributions from corporations and unions. There is no rule that a candidate, family member, or campaign staff cannot contribute to a third-party advertiser. However, it is potential optics issue. We'll now be taking a 10-minute break. So we'll be coming back at 8:05. Right now it's 7:55. So I believe the municipality provided some awesome treats. So enjoy. We'll be back in 10 minutes, everyone. So we'll start out. Hi everyone, we'll be returning back to the presentation, so we'll just wait one more moment for everyone to go back to the seats and we'll continue with contributions. Thank you.
Is everyone ready for the next part? We're going to try and keep this light. It is a lot of information, we realize. All right, so contributions, campaign contributions are monies, goods or services given to a candidate for his or her election campaign. So cash contributions may only be accepted up to $25. Contributions more than $25 must be made by check, money order, or by a method that clearly shows where the funds came from. So fundraising functions are events or activities held by or on behalf of the candidate for the primary reason of raising money for the candidate's campaign. So the price of admission to a fundraising function is a campaign contribution, and a receipt must be issued for the full amount. Receipts must be issued for every contribution and should contain the name and address of the contributor and the amount and date. So the limits on contributions to any one candidate or registered third-party advertiser is $1,200. So that's except for the City of Toronto, mayoral candidates, in which case the amounts jumped to $2,500. So the individual contribution amount has increased from $750 to $1,200, but the aggregate amount of $5,000 stays the same. Since candidates and third-party advertisers are required to inform contributors of contribution limits, you may want to include the limits on the receipts provided to the contributors. So self-funding limits for municipal council candidates based on the number of electors voting for the office is to a maximum of 25,000 per candidate. So the formula for calculating the limit is 7,500 plus 20 cents per elector for head of council and 5,000 plus 20 cents per elector for other council offices. So the highest self-funding limit that anyone can possibly have is 25,000. If the formula works out to a number that's over 25,000, they still get the 25,000 limit. If the formula works out to less than 25,000, then they get whatever the formula works out to. This was where we went. Sorry. That was too far. So yeah, that's the formula. So borrowing. So while candidates can open their campaign account with their own funds, the candidate cannot loan funds to his or her campaign to kickstart it with the intention of getting it all back. So the only way that a candidate can reclaim this startup amount is after the election campaign period ends and prior to filing the financial statement The candidate or his or her spouse may be refunded any contributions from surplus. So you can't receive a loan from family members or from any corporate account that you may have access to. The loan isn't considered to be campaign income, and paying it back is not a campaign expense. But if you or your spouse guarantee the loan and the campaign does not repay all of it, the remaining balance is considered to be a contribution, since the guarantor is basically providing the campaign the means to repay the loan. So keep in mind the contribution limit for the candidate and spouse to borrowing. Any interest that the campaign pays on the loan is a campaign expense. So expenses can be the replacement value of goods retained by the person, individual, corporation, or trade union from any previous election in the municipality and used in the current election. It's the value of contributions of goods and services, the audit and accounting fees, interest on loans under section 88 subsection 17, the cost of holding fundraising functions, the cost of holding parties and making other expressions of appreciation after the close of voting. For a candidate, expenses relating to a recount or a proceeding under section 83, expenses relating to a compliance audit, expenses that are incurred by a candidate with a disability or a registered third party who is an individual with a disability are directly related to the disability and would not have been incurred but for the election to which the expenses relate. Also included is the cost of election campaign advertisements, and that's within the meaning of section 88 subsection 3, or third-party advertisements as the case may be. So for greater certainty, the cost of holding fundraising functions does not include costs that are related to events or activities that are organized for such purposes as promoting public awareness of a candidate and at which the soliciting of contributions is incidental. So promoting and also promotional materials in which the soliciting of contributions is incidental. So candidates and third parties, advertisers should become familiar with campaign expense provisions. Campaign expenses are those costs incurred by the candidate or on the candidate's behalf during his or her campaign or by a third-party advertiser during their campaign. So the nomination filing fee is no longer an expense and is not included on the financial disclosure form. Goods and services donated to the campaign are also expenses, and they must be reported. So a receipt must be provided for fair market value. Only the nominated persons and or third-party advertisers can incur expenses during the campaign period. Payment of any campaign expense must be drawn from the campaign account, and a receipt providing the details and proof of payment must be obtained. So all expenses must be reported in the relevant financial disclosure form to be filed with the clerk by the candidate or the third-party advertiser. And with respect to campaign inventories, if you ran in the last election and you want to use leftover goods, such as signs or office supplies, you have to determine what the current market value for those goods is and what it would cost you to purchase them today. Those amounts are recorded as an expense. So conversely, if you end up with leftover inventory at the end of this campaign, and it becomes your personal property, but you want to store them to use in another election, any costs for storage are not considered campaign expenses. So the spending limit formula for candidates and the maximum amount for parties after voting day are set out in Ontario Regulation 10197. So the clerk of the municipality calculates the spending limit twice. The first time is upon the candidate filing the nomination form. The clerk shall calculate the spending limit based on the number of electors on the voters list as it existed on September 15, 2018, the last election. The second calculation is based on the number of electors on the voters list as it exists on September 15, 2022. So this calculation must be provided to candidates on or before September 25, 2022. Whatever number is higher is the spending limit, and the clerk's calculation is final. Okay. So clerks will continue to provide estimates of the spending limits. Dates have been slightly amended with transition dates for the 2018 election. Candidates will be required to inform their contributors of the contribution limits. So that's how much a contributor can contribute to an individual candidate's campaign, and the aggregate limit on contributions to any one council or local board election. The spending limit is to be provided by September 25th. If a third-party advertiser has registered in more than one municipality, each registration is a separate campaign with its own spending limit. The campaign finance rules are generally the same for third-party advertisers as they are for candidates. So they're subject to the same contribution limits and have calculated spending limits. And this includes financial filing requirements, requests for extensions, and records. Third-party advertisers are also required to ensure contribution and expenses are tracked and accounted for. Proper record retention, proper direction is provided to those incurring expenses for accepting contributions on their behalf, and that spending limits are adhered to. So expenses, most expenses are subject to the spending limit. Those listed in the slide are not. Those are expenses related to fundraising functions are exempt from the campaign spending limit, but in order to qualify as a fundraising function, an event must have the raising of money as its primary purpose. Campaign events at which incidental fundraising takes place do not qualify as fundraising functions. And similarly, a brochure promoting awareness of a candidate that contains contact information to make campaign contributions doesn't qualify as a fundraising function. Expenses that were subject to the spending limit if incurred before voting day are not subject to the spending limit if incurred after voting day. All right, so I'm going to switch over to the next one.
Thank you. So although the next few slides might be a bit dry, they're very important. It's on the campaign finance rules, so please pay attention to the next few slides. So third-party advertising spending limits. So third-party advertisers will be subject to two spending limits, a general spending limit and a separate limit for expenses related to parties and expressions of appreciation after the close of voting. The Ontario Regulation 101/97 provides the following formula for calculating third-party spending limits: $5,000 plus 5 cents per elector to a maximum of $25,000. The formula used is based on the number of electors entitled to vote in an election in the municipality. The Municipal Elections Act also provides that the spending limit for parties and other expressions of appreciation after voting day be set at 10% of the general spending limit. This would be consistent with the spending limit in place for candidates. So again, the campaign finance rules, really important slides. As a candidate or third-party advertiser, it is important that you're fully aware of the responsibilities regarding election spending and accepting campaign contributions. A question that we are asked each municipal election is whether there's a requirement for every candidate to have a chief financial officer. The answer is no. We suggest that you familiarize yourselves with sections 88.8 through to 88.2121 of the Municipal Elections Act, and also the financial statements that you will be required to file. This will help guide you in organizing your records and how they have to be reported. You are required under the Municipal Elections Act to keep accurate records and open a campaign bank account if you are spending any money or accepting any contributions. Please note that a bank account is not required if a candidate or third-party advertiser does not spend nor receive any money. We get asked that question a lot, that's why. So candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep complete and accurate financial statements during the course of their campaigns. All contributions and expenses are to be accounted for and disclosed by the candidate on the relevant prescribed financial form. All candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep all campaign financial records until after November 15, 2026, when a new council takes office. These rules apply whether you are elected or not. A reminder, pass the hat donations that are under $25 may be given anonymously, and you don't have to issue a receipt. This is a campaign income that is not considered to be a contribution, and the total amount received must be reported as such on the campaign financial statements. Campaign finances, continued part 3. As a best practice, candidates and third-party advertisers should store receipts in a secure place as they are valuable documents. Receipts must be signed by the candidate or his or her designate. It is good practice to have a receipt that is a multi-part form, one for the contributor and one or more for the candidate's records. Receipts should be sequentially numbered. Please open a bank account which provides monthly statements and canceled checks. Produce duplicate deposit slips for every deposit, listing the names of the contributors and the amounts received from each. Maintain a petty cash fund to handle minor expenses. And obtain invoices to support all payments from the fund. At any time, the cash on hand plus the total amount of invoices should equal the original amount of the petty cash fund. The fund can be replenished periodically by a check drawn on the campaign account in an amount equal to the total amount of the invoices. Candidates and third-party advertisers may find it useful to look over Form 4 for candidates and Form 8 for third-party advertisers, respectively, at the beginning of their campaign to give them an idea of what information will be needed to be reported on at the end of their campaigns. This is a requirement under the Municipal Elections Act to maintain your records until November 15, 2023. Campaign advertisements. The period for third-party advertisers, as shown on this slide, it is the period when the rules for third-party advertisers applies. In 2022, that is from May 1st, 2022 until the close of voting at 8 p.m. on October 24th, 2022. Please note that third-party advertisers and candidates are required to identify themselves on signs and advertisements. For more information, please refer to the Municipal Elections Act for candidates, Section 88, subsection 3, and for third-party advertisers, Section 88, subsection 4. We have received the suggestion that third-party advertising cannot be done outside of the campaign period. This is not accurate. Outside of this period, anyone can do third-party advertising, and the rules do not apply. Keep in mind that third-party advertising under the Municipal Elections Act means to support or oppose a candidate, and there are, strictly speaking, no candidates outside of the advertising period. Advertisements continue. The broadcaster or publisher of a third party or candidate advertisement shall maintain records containing the following information for the period of 4 years after the date the advertisement appears, and shall permit the public to inspect the records during normal business hours. The name of the candidate registered third-party advertiser, the name, business address, and telephone number of the individual who deals with the broadcaster or publisher under the direction of the candidate registered third-party advertiser, a copy of the advertisement or the means of reproducing it for inspection, and lastly, a statement of the charge made for its appearance. So again, these next few slides are quite important. We get asked a lot of questions on financial statements. So under section 88.25 of the Municipal Elections Act, all candidates are required to file Form 4 with the clerk, regardless of how much or how little they spent or fundraised. If you filed a nomination form, you must file a Form 4. The form is required even if you withdrew your nomination or were acclaimed. If you are registered as a third-party advertiser, you must complete Form 8. A candidate must resubmit a financial statement to correct an error up until the filing deadline. The clerk is required to make public a report of which candidates filed financial statements and which did not. Financial statements continue. The appointment of an auditor by the candidate is mandatory if expenses or contributions exceed $10,000. The auditor must be licensed under the Public Accounting Act. And please note that campaign statements are public documents. Financial statements part 3. So candidates can file their financial documents at any time after voting day to January 3rd, adjusted from December 31st as it falls on Saturday. Filing the financial statement ends the campaign period. This will make it easier for acclamations and campaigns where little or no expense is incurred. Clerks will be required to report whether candidates have met their financial filing obligation and publish that report on the municipal website or in another electronic form. This needs to be done by April 30th in the case of a regular election or with 90 days of a by-election. Clerks can determine the conditions for the electronic filing of financial statements. Carol will be continuing with this. We get asked a question with respect to surplus every single session. So please take note of this next slide.
Surpluses. When you're filing the financial statement, a candidate or a third-party advertiser with a campaign surplus must pay the entire amount to the clerk. So prior to paying over any surplus funds to the clerk, a candidate or a third-party advertiser is entitled to a refund of any contributions they or their spouse, if in the case of an individual, made to the campaign, but not anyone else. So the amount that may be refunded is the lesser of the amount of the relevant contribution of the amount of the surplus. I know this is super complicated. These guys are going to help you with that. So the clerk is required to place surplus money in trust for use by the candidate if they need it for a compliance audit. So the clerk is required to place surplus money in trust for use by a third-party advertiser if they need it for a compliance audit. So if neither the candidate nor third-party advertiser requires the funds for these purposes, it becomes the property of the municipality or school board. So every council and school board must establish a compliance audit committee. So members of the compliance audit committee cannot be members of the council or school board, an employee, a candidate in the election, or a registered third-party advertiser. So clerks are to review contributions and to prepare a report for consideration by the Compliance Audit Committee if a contributor appears to have exceeded any contribution limits. So this process is related to reviewing contributions as reported on the financial statements and is not connected to the compliance audit process. So if it's apparent to the clerk that a contributor has exceeded one or more of the contribution limits, the clerk would report this to the committee, which would meet to determine whether to proceed with legal action. The legislation does not specify what details are to be provided in the report of the committee. Electors entitled to vote in an election may apply for a compliance audit even if the candidate has not filed a financial statement. The application must be in writing and set out the elector's reason for why they believe the Municipal Elections Act has been contravened. So the application must be submitted to the municipal clerk or the secretary of the school board within 90 days of the filing deadline. The Compliance Audit Committee will then consider the application and decide whether to retain an auditor to undertake a compliance audit of the candidate's financial return. So the Compliance Audit Committee is required to provide brief written reasons for its decision. Compliance Audit Committee meetings are required to be open to the public, but the committee may deliberate in private. So electors can apply for a compliance audit or third-party advertiser campaign finances. The minister has the authority to make a regulation setting out qualifications for compliance audit committee members. Now, in subsection 88, well, section 88, subsection 33, the written reasons for the committee's decision shall be given to the candidate, the clerk, with whom the candidate filed his or her nomination, the secretary of the local board, if it's applicable, and the applicant. If an audit occurs, the report must be circulated to the same individuals. The Compliance Audit Committee considers the auditor's report, and if they determine that there's been an apparent contravention of the Municipal Election Act, they will decide whether to proceed with legal action. Decisions of the committee may be appealed to the Superior Court of Justice. A person who believes that a candidate has contravened the Municipal Election Act may proceed with legal action without having first obtained a compliance audit. So, offenses. An offense constitutes a corrupt practice, and a person who commits it is on conviction disqualified from voting in an election until the next regular election has taken place after the election to which the offense relates, in addition to be liable to any other penalty provided for in the Municipal Elections Act. So this is important. No person shall, directly or indirectly, offer, give, lend, or promise, or agree to give or lend any valuable consideration in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. No person should advance, pay, or cause to be paid money intending that it be used to commit an offense referred to in clause A, which was the one I just read you, or knowing that it will be used to repay money used in that way. Give, procure, or promise, or agree to procure an office or employment in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. Apply for, agree, or accept, or agree to accept any valuable consideration of office or employment in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. And finally, give, procure, or promise, or agree to procure an office or employment to induce a person to become a candidate, refrain from becoming a candidate, or withdraw his or her candidacy. So this is the list of penalties, and you can see for individuals, candidate, trade union, or corporation. So the ineligibility to vote is a penalty if you're convicted of a corrupt practice. You just have a look at that. So the voters list, the preliminary list of electors as corrected by the clerk becomes the voters list on September 1st, 2022. The clerk determines how and when individuals can apply to have their name and information corrected or added or removed from the voters list. So the clerk can also remove a name from the list if the clerk becomes aware that the person has died. The clerk shall not provide a copy of the voters list under subsection 3 or a part of the voters list under subsection 4, section 23, until September 1st. So this is also very important. One copy of the voters list can be provided to each municipal candidate or trustee candidate, and the request must be made in writing to the clerk. Candidates running in a ward are entitled only to that portion of the list that contains the name of the electors entitled to vote for that office. Copies of the voters list, as we said, just said, are not available before September 1st, 2022. Now, this is super important. The voters list shall not be posted in a public place. The voters list shall not be made available to the public by posting on the internet website or via any other print or electronic medium or mass communication. This is your first job as protecting the privacy of your voters. Third-party advertisers are not eligible to receive a copy of the voters list. And as we said, candidates running in a ward are entitled only to that portion of the list that contains the name of the electors to vote for that office. So the clerk may require anyone who receives a copy of the list to sign a receipt acknowledging the list is only to be used for election purposes, and any other use would be in violation of the Municipal Elections Act. An elector's name shall appear only once on the list. In a ward system, an elector is entitled to vote only in the ward where he or she resides. Switch to Caitlin for the conclusion. Thank you.
I'll be concluding our presentation and I'll try to move as quickly as possible. So voting proxy, there are a number of reasons why someone would want to appoint someone else to vote on their behalf, including absence from the area, illness, or etc. Clerks may designate a place and time for presentation of proxy voting application and appointment forms for clerk certification. On days of advanced vote, the clerk's office or another location may be designated and open from noon to 5 p.m. And please refer to your municipal clerks or to section 44, subsection 6 of the Municipal Elections Act for more information. Assignment of a proxy vote is the responsibility of an eligible voter to appoint an identified eligible voter. Eligible proxy may exercise only one proxy vote unless the proxy is acting on behalf of a spouse, sibling, parent, child, grandchild, or grandparent. For more information, again, please refer to sections 44, subsection 2 and 3 of the Municipal Elections Act. Please note that proxy forms must have original signatures. Please check with your municipal clerk if proxy voting is available, as municipalities that use alternative voting may not permit proxy voting. Scrutineers. This took me a while to pronounce, by the way, so. Only a candidate may appoint scrutineers to represent him or her during the voting and the counting of votes, including during a recount. Third-party advertisers cannot appoint scrutineers. In the traditional election where voting takes place at the poll, the Deputy Returning Officer, DRO, is in charge of the activity in the voting place, and the DRO may ask the scrutineer to leave if the scrutineer is not complying with the legislation. Candidates and scrutineers should respect that the DRO must ensure fairness, access, privacy, and security of the vote. Check with the clerk to see if a list of scrutineers' rights is being given to election staff at the poll. If so, use that list to prepare your own and hand out to each of your scrutineers a list of their rights, which is spelled out in section 47, subsection 5 of the Municipal Elections Act. Recounts. A recount is automatic if the vote is tied. Councils and school boards have the option of establishing policies prior to the election that allows also for an automatic recount. Council still retains the option to pass a resolution for a recount within 30 days after the clerk has declared the results of the election. An eligible elector can apply to the courts for a recount within 30 days of the clerk's declaration of the results. This is a really important slide, so please pay attention. So voting day is Monday, October 24th between 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. unless reduced hours are set out in a bylaw for retirement homes and institutions, or council has passed a bylaw to open voting earlier than 10 a.m. Again, please contact your municipal clerk for this information. The campaign period. The time when a candidate can accept contributions and incur election expenses runs from the date the nomination is submitted up until January 3rd, 2023. The campaign period, the time the third-party advertiser can incur expenses, begins on the date the registration is certified. The earliest date is coming up, May 1st, 2022, until January 3rd, 2023. The deadline for the filing of the campaign financial statement in the clerk's office is Friday, March 31st, 2023, no later than 2 p.m. All candidates and third-party advertisers must file this statement regardless of how much they spent or received in contributions. Resources. The first link will take you to the e-laws website where all provincial legislation is available online, including the associated regulations. You want to be familiar with the Municipal Elections Act, the Municipal Act, the Municipal Conflicts of Interest Act, and if running for a school board, the Education Act. The second link takes you to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing website. I highly suggest looking at this link. These guides are really helpful. From this site, you will be able to access the 2022 Voters Guide, Candidates Guide, and Third-Party Advertisers Guide. The last link is the Municipal World. Municipal World website, if you click on the icon bookshop, it illustrates a list of books that are related to running for municipal office. They are available to purchase online. So this concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for having us. Your municipal advisor for Elgin County is Jane Parnell. So her email is jane.parnell, JANE.Parnell, PARNELL @ontario.ca. We will be heading into question period. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Again, if I'm not able to answer today, please contact Jane Parnell or reach out to your local municipal clerk. I did want to start the question period with some questions that we've received during a lot of the sessions that we've had. And then I'll take questions. So a question that we've received during many of the sessions is, can I incur expenses before I open a campaign bank account? Yes, you can incur expenses before you open the account. for example, ordering of signs or something like that, but you need to pay for them through that account. You cannot incur expenses before you file your nomination. Another question that we've received is in respect to third-party advertising. Can anyone can make comments or statements about any issues in the election without registering, as long as they do not incur any costs or expense to do so. If they incur expenses and their advertisements supports or opposes a candidate or candidates or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot, then they need to register before incurring these expenses. If they want to incur expenses on any advertising during the restricted period, May 1st to the end of voting day without registering, then they should seek their own legal advice. And lastly, we get a lot of questions about surplus. I know we mentioned it during the presentation, but I just want to reiterate it again. When filing a financial statement, a candidate or third-party advertiser with a campaign surplus must pay the entire amount to the clerk. Prior to paying over any surplus funds to the clerk, a candidate or third-party advertiser is entitled to a refund of any contributions they or their spouse, if an individual, made to the campaign, not to anyone else. The amount that may be refunded is lesser of the amount of the relevant contribution or the amount of the surplus. The clerk is required to place surplus monies in trust for use by the candidate, and the clerk is required to place surplus monies in trust for use by the third-party advertiser. Okay, so yes, does anyone have any questions? Do you want me to talk more about third-party advertising? I received a few questions about that during the break. I can mention that if anyone's interested.